also in the sense one, laws, compare Protagoras. So various, and if regarded on the surface only, inconsistent, are the statements of Plato respecting the doctrine of ideas. If we attempt to harmonize or to combine them, we should make out of them not a system, but a caricature of a system. They are the ever-varying expression of Plato's idealism. The terms used in them are in their substance and general meaning the same, although they seem to be different. They pass from the subject to the object, from the earth, dieseits, to heaven, genseits, without a regard to the gulf which later theology and philosophy have made between them. They are also intended to supplement or explain each other. They relate to a subject of which Plato himself would have said he was not confident of the precise form of his own statements, but was strong in the belief that something of the kind was true. It is the spirit, not the letter, in which they agree, the spirit which places the divine above the human, the spiritual above the material, the one above the many, the mind before the body. The stream of ancient philosophy in the Alexandrian and Roman times widens into a lake or sea, and then disappears underground to reappear after many ages in a distant land. It begins to flow again under new conditions, at first confined between high and narrow banks, but finally spreading over the continent of Europe. It is and is not the same with ancient philosophy. There is a great deal in modern philosophy which is inspired by ancient. There is much in ancient philosophy which was born out of due time, and before men were capable of understanding it. To the fathers of modern philosophy, their own thoughts appeared to be new and original, but they carried with them an echo or shadow of the past, coming back by recollection from an elder world. Of this, the enquirers of the 17th century, who to themselves appeared to be working out independently the inquiry into all truth, were unconscious. They stood in a new relation to theology and natural philosophy, and for a time maintained towards both an attitude of reserve and separation. Yet the similarities between the modern and ancient thought are greater far than the differences. All philosophy, even that part of it which is said to be based upon experience, is really ideal, and ideas are not only derived from facts, but they are also prior to them and extend far beyond them, just as the mind is prior to the senses. Early Greek speculation culminates in the ideas of Plato, or rather in the single idea of good. His followers, and perhaps he himself, having arrived at this elevation, instead of going forwards, went backwards from philosophy to psychology, from ideas to numbers. But what we perceive to be the real meaning of them, an explanation of the nature and origin of knowledge, will always continue to be one of the first problems of philosophy. Plato also left behind him a most potent instrument, the forms of logic, arms ready for...
How to get omega isotopes.
Here is some information for Warframe where to get omega isotopes. According to Warframe Wiki, fandom, omega isotopes are a resource exclusive to planets where Belor Fomorians are present. Omega isotopes drop as an uncommon resource from enemies on any non-Archwing mission on any planet with an active Fomorian sabotage alert.
Used, but not yet taken out of their armory. They were the late birth of the early Greek philosophy, and were the only part of it which has had an uninterrupted hold on the mind of Europe. Philosophies come and go, but the detection of fallacies, the framing of definitions, the invention of methods still continue to be the main elements of the reasoning process. Modern philosophy, like ancient, begins with very simple conceptions. It is almost wholly a reflection on self. It might be described as a quickening into life of old words and notions latent in the semi-barbarous Latin, and putting a new meaning into them. Unlike ancient philosophy, it has been unaffected by impressions derived from outward nature. It arose within the limits of the mind itself. From the time of Descartes to Hume and Kant, it has had little or nothing to do with facts of science. On the other hand, the ancient and medieval logic retained a continuous influence over it, and a form like that of mathematics was easily impressed upon it. The principle of ancient philosophy, which is most apparent in it, is skepticism. We must doubt nearly every traditional or received notion that we may hold fast one or two. The being of God in a personal or impersonal form was a mental necessity to the first thinkers of modern times. From this alone, all other ideas could be deduced. There had been an obscure presentiment of cogito ergo sum more than 2,000 years previously. The Eleatic notion that being and thought were the same was revived in a new form by Descartes. But now it gave birth to consciousness and self-reflection. It awakened the ego in human nature. The mind, naked and abstract, has no other certainty but the conviction of its own existence. I think, therefore I am. And this thought is God thinking in me, who has also communicated to the reason of man his own attributes of thought and extension. These are truly imparted to him because God is true. Compare Republic. It has been often remarked that Descartes, having begun by dismissing all presuppositions, introduces several. He passes almost at once from skepticism to dogmatism. It is more important for the illustration of Plato to observe that he, like Plato, insists that God is true and incapable of deception, Republic, that he proceeds from general ideas, that many elements of mathematics may be found in him. A certain influence of mathematics both on the form and substance of their philosophy is discernible in both of them. After making the greatest opposition between thought and extension, Descartes, like Plato, supposes them to be reunited for a time, not in their own nature, but by a special divine act, compare Phaedrus. And he also supposes all parts of the human modern philosophy as having begun, like the pre-Socratics, with a few general notions. Descartes first falls absolutely under their influence and then quickly discards them. At the same time, he is less able to observe facts because they are too much magnified by the glasses through which they are seen. The common logic says the greater the extension, the less the comprehension. And we may put the same thought in another way and say of abstract or general ideas that the greater the abstraction of them, the less they are capable of being applied to particular and concrete natures. Not very different from Descartes in his relation to ancient philosophy is his successor Spinoza, who lived in the following generation. The system of Spinoza is less personal and also less dualistic than that of Descartes. In this respect, the difference between them is like that between Xenophanes and Parmenides. The teaching of Spinoza might be described generally as the Jewish religion reduced to an abstraction and taking the form of the Eleatic philosophy. Like Parmenides, he is overpowered and intoxicated with the idea of being or God. The greatness of both philosophies consists in the immensity of a thought which includes all other thoughts. Their weakness is the necessary separation of this thought from actual existence and from practical life. In neither of them is there any clear opposition between the inward and outward world. The substance of Spinoza has two attributes which alone are cognizable by man, thought and extension. These are in extreme opposition to one another and also in inseparable identity. They may be regarded as the two aspects or expressions under which God or substance is unfolded to man. Here a step is made beyond the limits of the Eleatic philosophy. The famous theorem of Spinoza, omnis determinatio ex negatio, is already contained in the negation in relation of Plato's sophist. The grand description of the philosopher in Republic 6 as a spectator of all time and all existence may be paralleled with another famous expression of Spinoza. Contemplatio rerum sub specie eternitatis. According to Spinoza, finite objects are unreal, for they are conditioned by what is alien to them and by one another. Human beings are included in the number of them. Hence, there is no reality in human action and no place for right and wrong. Individuality is accident. The boasted freedom of the will is only a consciousness of necessity. Truth, he says, is the direction of the reason towards the infinite, in which all things repose, and herein lies the secret of man's well-being, in the exaltation of the reason or intellect, in the denial of the voluntariness of evil, Timaeus' laws. Spinoza approaches nearer to Plato than in his conception of an infinite substance. As Socrates said that virtue is knowledge, so Spinoza would have maintained that knowledge alone is good, and what contributes to knowledge useful. Both are equally far from any real experience or observation of nature, and the same difficulty is found in both when we seek to apply their ideas to life and practice. There is a gulf fixed between the infinite substance and finite objects or individuals of Spinoza, just as there is between the ideas of Plato and the world of sense. Removed from Spinoza by less than a generation is the philosopher Leibniz, who after deepening and intensifying the opposition between mind and matter, reunites them by his preconcerted harmony. Compare again Phaedrus. To him all the particles of matter are living beings which reflect on one another, and in the least of them the whole is contained. Here we catch a reminiscence both of the homeomere, or similar particles of Anaxagoras, and of the world animal of the Timaeus. In Bacon and Locke, we have another development in which the mind of man is supposed to receive knowledge by a new method, and to work by observation and experience. But we may remark that it is the idea of experience, rather than experience itself, with which the mind is filled. It is a symbol of knowledge rather than the reality which is vouchsafed to us. The organon of Bacon is not much nearer to actual facts than the organon of Aristotle, or the Platonic idea of good. Many of the old rags and ribbons which deface the garment of philosophy have been stripped off, but some of them still adhere. A crude conception of the ideas of Plato survives in the forms of Bacon, and on the other hand, there are many passages of Plato in which the importance of the investigation of facts is as much insisted upon as by Bacon. Both are almost equally superior to the illusions of language and are constantly crying out against them as against other idols. Locke cannot be truly regarded as the author of sensationalism any more than of idealism. His system is based upon experience, but with him, experience includes reflection as well as sense. His analysis and construction of ideas has no foundation in fact. It is only the dialectic of the mind talking to herself. The philosophy of Berkeley is but the transposition of two words. For objects of sense, he would substitute sensations. He imagines himself to have changed the relation of the human mind towards God and nature. They remain the same as before, though he has drawn the imaginary line by which they are divided at a different point. He has annihilated the outward world, but it instantly reappears, governed by the same laws and described under the same names. A like remark applies to David Hume, of whose philosophy the central principle is the denial of the relation of cause and effect. He would deprive men of a familiar term which they can ill afford to lose, but he seems not to have observed that this alteration is merely verbal, and does not in any degree affect the nature of things. Still less did he remark that he was arguing from the necessary imperfection of language against most certain facts. And here again we may find a parallel with the ancients. He goes beyond facts in the skepticism, as they did in their idealism. Like the ancient sophists, he relegates the more important principles of ethics to custom and probability. But crude and unmeaning as this philosophy is, it exercised a great influence on his successors, not unlike that which Locke exercised upon Berkeley, and Berkeley upon Hume himself. All three were both skeptical and ideal in almost equal degrees. Neither they nor did their predecessors had any true conception of language or of the history of philosophy. Hume's paradox has been forgotten by the world, and did not any more than the skepticism of the ancients require to be seriously refuted. Like some other philosophical paradoxes, it would have been better left to die out. It certainly could not be refuted by a philosophy such as Kant's, in which, no less than in the previously mentioned systems, the history of the human mind and the nature of language are almost wholly ignored, and the certainty of objective knowledge is transferred to the subject, while absolute truth is reduced to a figment, more abstract and narrow than Plato's ideas of thing in itself, to which, if we reason strictly, no predicate can be applied. The question which Plato has raised respecting the origin and nature of ideas belongs to the infancy of philosophy. In modern times it would no longer be asked. Their origin is only their history. So far as we know it, there can be no other. We may trace them in language, in philosophy, in mythology, in poetry, but we cannot argue a priori about them. We may attempt to shake them off, but they are always returning, and in every sphere of science and human action are tending to go beyond facts. They are thought to be innate because they have been familiar to us all our lives, and we can no longer dismiss them from our mind. Many of them express relations of terms to which nothing exactly or nothing at all in rerum natura corresponds. We are not such free agents in the use of them as we sometimes imagine. Fixed ideas have taken the most complete possession of some thinkers who have been most determined to renounce them, and have been vehemently affirmed when they could least be explained and were incapable of truth. The world has often been led away by a word to which no distinct meaning could be attached. Abstractions such as authority, equality, utility, liberty, pleasure, experience, consciousness, chance, substance, matter, atom, and a heap of other metaphysical and theological terms are the source of quite as much error and illusion, and have as little relation to actual facts as the ideas of Plato. Few students of theology or philosophy have sufficiently reflected how quickly the bloom of a philosophy passes away, or how hard it is for one age to understand the writings of another, or how nice a judgment is required of those who are seeking to express the philosophy of one age in terms of another. The eternal truths of which metaphysicians speak have hardly ever lasted more than a generation. In our own day, schools or systems of philosophy which have once been famous have died before the founders of them. We are still, as in Plato's age, groping about for a new method more comprehensive than any of those which now prevail, and also more permanent. And we seem to see at a distance the promise of such a method, which can hardly be any other than the method of idealized experience, having roots which strike far down into the history of philosophy. It is a method which does not divorce the present from the past, or the part from the whole, or the abstract from the concrete, or theory from fact, or the divine from the human, or one science from another, but labors to connect them. Along such a road we have proceeded a few steps, sufficient perhaps to make us reflect on the want of method which prevails in our own day. In another age, all the branches of knowledge, whether relating to God or man or nature, will become the knowledge of the revelation of a single science. And all things, like stars in heaven, will shed their light upon one another.
End of section 2 on the ideas of Plato. Read to you by Chiquito Crasto, Birmingham, Alabama.
Part 1 of the Dialogues with Meno by Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read for you by Chiquito Crasto. Part 1 of the Dialogues with Meno. Meno. Persons of the dialogue. Meno, Socrates, a slave of Meno, boy, Anytus. Meno. Can you tell me, Socrates, whether virtue is acquired by teaching or by practice, or if neither by teaching nor by practice, then whether it comes to man by nature, or in what other way? Socrates. Oh, Meno, there was a time when the Thessalians were famous among the other Hellenes only for their riches and their riding. But now, if I am not mistaken, they are equally famous for their wisdom, especially at Larissa, which is the native city of your friend Aristippus. And this is Gorgias's doing. For when he came there, the flower of the Aleudae, among them your admirer Aristippus and the other chiefs of the Thessalians, fell in love with his wisdom. And he has taught you the habit of answering questions in a grand and bold style, which becomes those who know, and is the style in which he himself answers all comers, and any Hellene who likes may ask him anything. How different is our lot, my dear Meno. Here at Athens there is a dearth of the commodity, and all wisdom seems to have emigrated from us to you. I am certain that if you were to ask any Athenian whether virtue was natural or acquired, he would laugh in your face and say, "Stranger, you have far too good an opinion of me if you think that I can answer your question. For I literally do not know what virtue is, and much less whether it is acquired by teaching or not. And I myself, Meno, living as I do in this region of poverty, as am poor as the rest of the world, and I confess with shame that I know literally nothing about virtue. And when I do not know the quid of anything, how can I know the quail? How, if I knew nothing at all of Meno, could I tell if he was fair, or the opposite of fair, rich and noble, or the reverse of rich and noble? Do you think that I could? Meno: No, indeed. But are you in earnest, Socrates, in saying that you do not know what virtue is? And am I to carry back this report of you to Thessaly? Socrates: Not only that, my dear boy, but you may say further that I have never known of anyone else who did, in my judgment. Meno: Then you have never met Gorgias when he was at Athens? Socrates: Yes, I have. Meno: And did you not think that he knew? Socrates: I have not a good memory, Meno, and therefore I cannot tell what I thought of him at the time. And I dare say that he did know, and that you know what he said. Please, therefore, to remind me of what he said, or, if you would rather, tell me your own view, for I suspect that you and he think much alike. Meno: Very true. Socrates: Never mind him, and do you tell me. By the gods, Meno, be generous, and tell me what you say that virtue is, for I shall be truly delighted to find that I have been mistaken, and that you and Gorgias do really have this knowledge, although I have been just saying that I have never found anybody who had. Meno: There will be no difficulty, Socrates, in answering your question. Let us take first the virtue of a man. He should know how to administer the state, and in the administration of it to benefit his friends and harm his enemies, and he must also be careful not to suffer harm himself. A woman's virtue, if you wish to know about that, may also be easily described. Her duty is to order her house and keep what is indoors and obey her husband. Every age, every condition of life, young or old, male or female, bond or free, has a different virtue. There are virtues numberless, and no lack of definitions of them. For virtue is relative to the actions and ages of each of us in all that we do, and that the same may be said of vice. Socrates: Compare Aristotle's Thought. Socrates: How fortunate I am, Meno. When I ask you for one virtue, you present me with a swarm of them. Compare Fiat. Which are in your keeping? Suppose that I carry on the figure of the swarm and ask of you, what is the nature of the bee? And you answer that there are many kinds of bees, and I reply, but do bees differ as bees, because there are many and different kinds of them, or are they not rather to be distinguished by some other quality, as for example, beauty, size, or shape? How would you answer me? Meno: I should answer that bees do not differ from one another, as bees. Socrates: And if I went on to say, that is what I desire to know, Meno. Tell me, what is the quality in which they do not differ, but are all alike? Would you be able to answer? Meno: I should. Socrates: And so of the virtues, however many and different they may be, they have all a common nature which makes them virtues, and on this he who would answer the question, what is virtue, would do well to have his eye fixed. Do you understand? Meno: I am beginning to understand, but I do not as yet take hold of the question as I could wish. Socrates: When you say, Meno, that there is one virtue of a man, another of a woman, another of a child, and so on, does this apply only to virtue, or would you say the same of health and size and strength? Or is the nature of health always the same, whether in man or woman? Meno, I should say that health is the same, both in man and woman. Socrates, and is not this true of size and strength? If a woman is strong, she will be strong by reason of the same form and of the same strength subsisting in her which there is in the man. I mean to say that strength as strength, whether of man or woman, is the same. Is there any difference? Meno, I think not. Socrates, and will not virtue as virtue be the same, whether in a child or in a grown-up person, in a woman or in a man? Meno, I cannot help feeling, Socrates, that this case is different from the others. Socrates, but why? Were you not saying that the virtue of a man was to order a state, and the virtue of a woman was to order a house? Meno, I did say so. Socrates, and can either house or state or anything be well ordered without temperance and without justice? Meno, certainly not. Socrates, then they who order a state or a house temperately or justly order them with temperance and justice? Meno, certainly. Socrates, then both men and women, if they are to be good men and women, must have the same virtues of temperance and justice? Meno, true. Socrates, and can either a young man or an elder one be good if they are intemperate and unjust? Meno, they cannot. Socrates, they must be temperate and just? Meno, yes. Socrates, then all men are good in the same way and by participation in the same virtues? Meno, such is the inference. Socrates, and they surely would not have been good in the same way unless their virtue had been the same? Meno, they would not. Socrates, then now that the sameness of all virtue has been proven, try and remember what you and Gorgias say that virtue is. Meno, will you have one definition of them all? Socrates, that is what I am seeking. Meno, if you want to have one definition of them all, I know not what to say, but that virtue is the power of governing mankind. Socrates, and does this definition of virtue include all virtue? Is virtue the same in a child and in a slave? Meno, can the child govern his father or the slave his master? And would he who governed be any longer a slave? Meno, I think not, Socrates. Socrates, no indeed. There would be small reason in that. Yet, once more, fair friend, according to you, virtue is the power of governing. But do you not add justly and not unjustly? Meno, yes, Socrates, I agree there, for justice is virtue. Socrates, would you say virtue, Meno, or a virtue? Meno, what do you mean? Socrates, I mean as I might say about anything, that a round, for example, is a figure and not simply figure, and I should adopt this mode of speaking because there are other figures. Meno, quite right, and that is just what I am saying about virtue, that there are other virtues as well as justice. Socrates, what are they? Tell me the names of them, as I would tell you the names of other figures if you ask me. Meno, courage and temperance and wisdom and magnanimity are virtues, and there are many others. Socrates, yes, Meno, and again we are in the same case. In searching after one virtue, we have found many, though not in the same way as before. But we have been unable to find the common virtue which runs through them all. Meno, why, Socrates, even now I am not able to follow you in the attempt to get at one common notion of virtue as of other things. Socrates, no wonder, but I will try to get nearer if I can. For you know that all things have a common notion. Suppose now that someone asked you the question which I asked before. Meno, he would say, what is figure? And if you answered roundness, he would reply to you in my way of speaking by asking whether you would say that roundness is figure or a figure, and you would answer a figure. Meno: certainly. Socrates: and for this reason, that there are other figures? Meno: yes. Socrates: and if he proceeded to ask, what other figures are there, you would have told him? Meno: I should. Socrates: and if he similarly asked what color is, and you answered whiteness, and the questioner rejoined, would you say that whiteness is color or a color? You would reply a color, because there are other colors as well. Meno: I should. Socrates: and if he had said, tell me what they are, you would have told him of other colors, which are colors just as much as whiteness. Meno: yes. Socrates: and suppose that he were to pursue the matter in my way, he would say, ever and anon we are landed in particulars, but this is not what I want. Tell me then, since you call them by a common name, and say that they are all figures, even when opposed to one another, what is that common nature which you designate as figure, which contains straight as well as round, and is no more one than the other? That would be your mode of speaking? Meno: yes. Socrates: and in speaking thus, you do not mean to say that round is round any more than straight, or the straight any more straight than round? Meno: certainly not. Socrates: you only assert that the round figure is not more a figure than the straight, or the straight than the round. Meno: very true. Socrates: to what then do we give the name of figure? Try and answer. Suppose that when a person asked you this question, either about figure or color, you were to reply, man, I do not understand what you want, or know what you are saying. He would look rather astonished and say, do you not understand that I am looking for the simile in multis? And then he might put the question in another form. Meno, he might say, what is that simile in multis which you call figure, and which includes not only round and straight figures, but all? Could you not answer that question, Meno? I wish that you would try, as the attempt will be good practice with a view to the answer about virtue. Meno: I would rather that you should answer, Socrates. Socrates: shall I indulge you? Meno: by all means. Socrates: and then you will tell me about virtue? Meno: I will. Socrates: then I must do my best, for there is a prize to be won. Meno: certainly. Socrates: well, I will try and explain to you what figure is. What do you say to this answer? Figure is the only thing which always follows colors. Will you be satisfied with it, as I am sure that I should be, if you would let me have a similar definition of virtue? Meno: but Socrates, it is such a simple answer. Socrates: why simple? Meno: because according to you, figure is that which always follows color. Socrates: granted. Meno: but if a person were to say that he does not know what color is any more than what figure is, what sort of answer would you have given him? Socrates: I should have told him the truth, and if he were a philosopher of the eristic and antagonistic sort, I should say to him, you have my answer, and if I am wrong, your business is to take up the argument and refute me. But if we were friends and were talking as you and I are now, I should reply in a milder strain and more in the dialectician's vein. That is to say, I should not only speak the truth, but I should make use of premises which the person interrogated would be willing to admit. And this is the way in which I shall endeavor to approach you. You will acknowledge, will you not, that there is such a thing as an end, or termination, or extremity, all which words are used in the same sense, although I am aware that Prodicus might draw distinctions about them. But still you, I am sure, would speak of a thing as ended or terminated. That is all which I am saying, not anything very difficult. Meno: yes, I should, and I believe that I understand your meaning. Meno: yes. Socrates: and you would speak of a surface and also of a solid, as for example in geometry. Meno: yes. Socrates: well then, you are now in a condition to understand my definition of figure. I define figure to be that in which the solid ends, or more concisely, the limit of solid. Meno: and now, Socrates, what is color? Socrates: You are outrageous, Meno, in thus plaguing a poor old man to give you an answer, when you will not take the trouble of remembering what is Gorgias's definition of virtue. Meno, when you have told me what I asked, I will tell you, Socrates. Socrates, a man who is blindfolded has only to hear you talking, and he would know that you are a fair creature and have still many lovers. Meno, why do you think so? Socrates, why? Because you always speak in imperatives. Like all beauties, when they are in their prime, you are tyrannical, and also, as I suspect, you have found out that I have weakness for the fair, and therefore to humor you I must answer. Meno, please do. Socrates, would you like me to answer you after the manner of Gorgias, which is familiar to you? Meno, I should like nothing better. Socrates, do not he and you and Empedocles say that there are certain effluences of existence? Meno, certainly. Socrates, and passages into which and through which the effluences pass? Meno, exactly. Socrates, and some of the effluences fit into the passages, and some of them are too small or too large. Meno, true. Socrates, and there is such a thing as sight? Meno, yes. Socrates, and now, as Pindar says, read my meaning, color is an effluence of form, commensurate with sight and palpable to sense. Meno, that, Socrates, appears to me to be an admirable answer. Socrates, why, yes, because it happens to be one which you have been in the habit of...
That is a call that I do not want to take right now. So I'm just gonna let it ring as I play.
Hearing, and your wit will have discovered, I suspect, that you may explain in the same way the nature of sound and smell, and of many other similar phenomena. Meno, quite true. Socrates, the answer, Meno, was in the orthodox solemn vein, and therefore was more acceptable to you than the other answer about figure. Meno, yes. Socrates, and yet, O son of Alexidemus, I cannot help thinking that the other was the better, and I am sure that you would be of the same opinion, if you would only stay and be initiated, and were not compelled, as you said yesterday, to go away before the mysteries. Meno, but I will stay, Socrates, if you will give me many such answers. Socrates, well then, for my own sake as well as for yours, I will do my best. But I am afraid I shall not be able to give you very many as good. And now in your turn, you are to fulfill your promise, and tell me what virtue is in the universal, and do not make a singular into a plural, as the facetious say of those who break a thing, but deliver virtue to me whole and sound, and not broken into a number of pieces. I have given you the pattern. Meno, well then, Socrates, virtue, as I take it, is when he who desires the honorable is able to provide it for himself. So the poet says, and I say too, virtue is the desire of things honorable and the power of attaining them. Socrates, and does he who desires the honorable also desire the good? Meno, certainly. Socrates, then there are some who desire the evil and others who desire the good. Do not all men, my dear sir, desire good? Meno, I think not. Socrates, there are some who desire evil? Meno, yes. Socrates, do you mean that they think the evils which they desire to be good, or do they know that they are evil and yet desire them? Meno, both, I think. Socrates, and do you really imagine